Okay, so hello and welcome to iTenv Healthcare Solutions webinar. We're excited to share a webinar on special scoring under MIPS today. My name is Chelsea Grover and I'm the Marketing Communications Coordinator for iTenv. I'd like to take a moment to explain the process for today's presentation. First, I'd like to mention that this webinar will be recorded. We'll send out a copy of the slides along with the recording within the next week. Next, for those of you who aren't familiar with iTenv, I want to share a bit of who we are with you. We specialize specifically in next-gen healthcare. We're passionate about providing solutions for our healthcare provider partners, which in turn help them to improve patient care, enhance the patient experience, and maintain a financially healthy practice. To sum it up, we do everything next-gen, and we also have two add-on productivity solutions for next-gen, ChartGuard and Refund Manager. Next, I'm excited to share some upcoming webinars with you. On November 16th, we're going to have a great educational webinar on how to prepare, prevent, and respond to a ransomware attack. We're also going to do one on the 2018 Quality Payment Program Final Rule as soon as that final rule is released, so keep checking your email for that. And starting in December, we're planning on doing some next-gen ones specifically related to the 5.9 8.4 upgrade. We'll send out more information on that as we get closer to it. Okay, so back to today's webinar on special scoring under MIPS. At the end of the presentation, we're going to open the floor up to questions from you. We'll answer all the questions at the end, but you can type them in the questions area of the webinar control panel whenever they occur to you. And finally, for audio clarity purposes, everyone's phone will remain muted throughout the entire webinar. If you experience audio issues, please use the chat box to let us know so we can resolve them. And again, questions can be entered in the questions box. So without further delay, I'd like to introduce our presenters for today. Lindsay Lanning is our Healthcare Compliance Consultant at iTenv, and Cindy Kincaid is Vice President of Client Solutions, also at iTenv. So Lindsay, I'm going to go ahead and pass the webinar off to you. Feel free to get started when you're ready.
Great, thank you, Chelsea. Hi, everyone, and thank you again for joining us today for our webinar, Special Scoring Under MIPS. With so many complexities found within this new merit-based incentive payment system, practices are finding it difficult to understand and identify what special scoring opportunities may actually be available to them based on their particular practice. So to help navigate and dissect these specificities, we want to walk you through key aspects of the MIPS program for clinicians who are eligible for those preferential scoring opportunities. Once we identify these special scoring entities, we will actually go over the intricate details surrounding your modified scoring standards and how it will benefit your providers. And I think it's going to surprise you just how many of you on this call will likely fall under one of these categories. All right, so on today's agenda, we're going to start with a very brief overview of MIPS. We will just be going over the reporting requirements for each category. I wanted to keep this section short since it's not the reason for the webinar, but it gives everyone the same knowledge foundation. So when I do point out the special scoring opportunities in the next section, you'll actually understand what they mean. And then to wrap up, we will look at a few frequently asked questions I've been getting a lot lately from both our clients and our own consulting team that I'm sure you all will be interested in as well. I think you'll find this presentation to be both a valuable review of the MIPS program, but also take it a step further and allow you to begin strategically looking at how, as a small practice, a rural practice, or other special status practice, you can actually maximize your participation in this program. Now, when I mentioned we were going to do a brief overview of the MIPS program, how many of you did a mental sigh of frustration? Because you've been on all the MIPS webinars. You couldn't possibly retain anything else because your mind is on macro overload. Well, you're not alone. And I think this graphic says it all. MIPS is supposedly the big elephant in the room, right? No one wants to address it or worry about it. But in reality, it's all we ever hear about now. I don't know about you, but my inbox is flooded with webinars or fact sheets on understanding MIPS every day. I've been hearing some new slang around the office lately to add to our many macronyms and phrases, my favorite being, I'm all MIPSed out. And believe me, I hear ya, but this program isn't going away. And it's only going to get more complex and have a bigger impact as the years go on. So let's get started by understanding the basics of the program and what your providers are actually responsible for. While most of us throw out the terms MIPS, MACRA, even the quality payment program as somewhat interchangeable, they really aren't, and they do mean different things. So to clarify, the Quality Payment Program was actually enacted under the Medicare Access and CHIP Reauthorization Act, which we often call MACRA. As you can see, the Quality Payment Program is comprised of two participation tracks, the Merit-Based Incentive Payment System, or MIPS, which we're talking about today, where clinicians receive a performance-based adjustment by providing quality care, supported by technology, and then reporting on that progress. And then alternatively, we have the Advanced Alternative Payment Model track, which are innovative payment models that have their own unique program requirements and a lump sum incentive. Since CMS is anticipating the majority of clinicians to participate in the MIPS track, we're going to start by looking at how providers can determine if they're even eligible to partake in the program for a chance at a positive incentive payment. First off, eligible professionals, or EPs as we've always called them, are now deemed ECs, or eligible clinicians. The vocab change came as a result of the expanded clinician types included in the program. So macro applies to physicians, PAs, NPs, CNSs, and CRNAs who bill more than $30,000 in Medicare Part B charges and treat over 100 Medicare Part B patients. This is where some confusion still surfaces with clients. Clinicians must meet both that $30,000 and 100 patient threshold. So for instance, you couldn't bill $40,000 in Medicare Part B charges and have seen, let's say, 94 patients and be eligible. You need to hit both, not one or the other. And just to point out here, we're not talking about Medicaid meaningful use. This is a completely separate program with its own rules and requirements, so don't get confused. We're only talking about Medicare today. Now, the first thing I do when I get a new client that I'm assisting with MIPS reporting is go through this checklist. I need to determine if any of their providers fall under the 3 exclusions. So if they're under the low volume threshold, that $30,000 and 100 patient mark, if they're in an APM, or if they're new to Medicare, so if it's their first year. I think we can all agree this is a good place to start, since the most important thing to do is determine whether or not you're even one of these clinicians who are included in MIPS. Once I do that, I move on to the preferential scoring opportunities. I want to know if they have any special circumstances that allow them to report less, so we don't waste time looking at requirements we actually don't have to worry about. So I figure out if any of their clinicians are non-physician ECs, if they're non-patient facing or hospital-based, or if their practice is in a rural area. Now, you might be wondering, how would she be able to figure all of this out? I'm not even sure if I could identify with certainty any of those statuses for my own practice. Well, the first place to track down this information is the clinician participation letter CMS sent to all practices this year in the spring. These screenshots provide you with what the participation letter looks like. It'll explain the program and how it will affect reimbursement, but the most important part of this letter is this attachment A, and that's the screenshot on the right. Attachment A reviews which clinicians in the practice are included in MIPS and should actively participate. It also identifies which clinicians are exempt based on what we discussed in the earlier slides around the volume thresholds. So this attachment actually lists the NPIs associated with each tax ID and provides you information with how to contact CMS if you need any support, if you have any concerns or questions about anything contained in this letter. So if you have any NPIs on there that shouldn't be, or vice versa, if you have NPIs that should be on there that aren't showing up. However, some of you on the call may be thinking, wait a minute, we never got that, or we definitely threw that away, or I don't have a clue what happened to that, I just know I've never seen it. Well, don't worry, there's an additional way that you can check your status and verify the information that you received in that letter. And it's what's called the QPP NPI Lookup Tool. And it's what I use when I assist clients with MIPS reporting. This is found on the Quality Payment Program website, which is the most helpful and informative website CMS has ever created. They really got it right with this one. I can't stress enough, not only does this website have this NPI lookup tool, but it also has a resource library and a category breakdown on requirements, and it shows you all the available measures. Now, on the first page of the site, you would just enter in the NPI of your clinician. It will come back and show you if a clinician is included or exempt, their clinician details listing provider types and associated TINs, and then finally the practice details. The practice details section is where we find the information on if this clinician has any associated special statuses. If they do not, you will see all the options will be grayed out. So in this example we're seeing on the screen now. Or If they are eligible for any special status, they will be bolded. This also gives you a practice versus individual breakdown, and you may be asking why. Well, the site offers both views because clinicians can participate as individuals based on their TIN NPI combination, or they can choose to participate as a group if there's more than one of you in a practice. Essentially what that means is that 2 or more clinicians who have a unique NPI each have actually reassigned their billing rights over to the TIN. So if the group option is chosen, the group will actually send in group level data across all 4 MIPS categories. And then all of the NPIs associated with that TIN will get one payment adjustment based on the group performance. Whereas if you report alone, the individual will send in data for themselves only, and they will see a payment adjustment for their NPI only. But this isn't the only decision providers will have to make when considering MIPS reporting. They will also need to decide if they're going to report for 90 days or a full year. Now, CMS has been pushing a full year reporting a lot. And a ton of practices I talk to are often under the assumption that in order to get the maximum incentive, they have to report for a full year. And this is false. You can still earn the maximum incentive by reporting for 90 days. It does not have to be for a full year. It just depends on the data, which option you choose. So whichever option gives you a higher composite score is going to be your best choice. Let me hammer this in again. Positive adjustments are based on the performance data, not the amount of information or length of time submitted. Now, since 2017 has been named a transition year, there is this pick your pace option where you can actually submit less than 90 days of data. But note, if you do this, you will not receive a positive payment adjustment. You would just be avoiding the penalty and essentially breaking even. But I'm here to tell you, we do not recommend doing this option, and we highly encourage you to submit for 90 days at a minimum. Honestly, I could use the rest of the hour we have and go on and on about why submitting less than 90 days worth of data is not the best choice for your practice, no matter what the circumstances, but you can all relax. I won't do that to you. Instead, we're actually going to look at the last reporting option to consider, and that's your submission mechanism. This graphic shows the many different ways that clinicians, either as individuals or as a group, can send in data to CMS. And for those of you who have participated in PCRS or the Medicare Meaningful Use Program in the past, you'll see that some of these options for submitting data look really familiar. There are differences depending on how you're participating, but I want to note across all 3 categories, there are some submission methods that are consistent. So all of these categories include an option to report via QCDR, a qualified registry, or through your EHR. This is good news, at least for NextGen users on the call, because the NextGen HQM is both a qualified registry and an EHR vendor. This means you can submit everything through the HQM. In the past, we could generate those program submission files for your PCRS or your CQM measures, but you still had to log into the CMS portal to manually input your meaningful use measures. Well, not anymore. You can do it all in one place. There's no more manual input. So I'm sure if I took all of you off mute right now, I would hear some hooping and hollering, maybe even some clapping. I know I was extremely excited about this added efficiency. That's really what you need to know about eligibility and reporting under MIPS. The rest is just category requirements. However, keep in mind to report for this year, October 2nd was the last day to begin the ACI improvement activities reporting periods under MIPS, as well as the Medicaid Meaningful Use 2017 reporting period. I know this is a separate program and I promise not to bring it up again, but I wanted to give you a friendly reminder. So this means we're already in the last possible reporting period for 2017. The clock is officially ticking. It's go time. You should be running your HCM reports and tracking your data to find any issues now while you can still take action to fix them. Moving on, let's look at the categories you will actually be reporting data on to be scored. Under MIPS, there are 4 categories that affect how you'll be paid by Medicare, and those are quality, clinical practice improvement activities or improvement activities, advancing care information, and cost. In determining a total score, specific weights are assigned to each of the 4 performance categories. Now, in 2017, for this transition year, cost will not be counted towards the final score. to allow clinicians more time to gain familiarity with the MIPS program. Because cost is weighted to 0, the other category weights will be as shown in that graphic. Quality with the most weight at 60%, ACI at 25%, and improvement activities at 15%. First up is the quality category. This replaces that PQRS program. Providers will need to actually report 6 measures, and 1 needs to be an outcome measure. If you can't find an outcome measure that applies to the scope of your practice or your patient population, that's okay. You can submit a high priority measure instead. Your performance rate will actually be compared to a benchmark, and these benchmarks vary based on submission method. And if you're reporting through the HQM, you can choose to either use the PQRS report or the registry option, or the CQM report or the EHR option. It's still the same submission process, just different measure specifications are used. There are bonus points available in the category, although it is capped at 10% of the category score, so that's 6 points. You can earn those 6 points by either reporting additional outcome or high priority measures, or by reporting your measure using electronic reporting. And yes, using the HQM to report does meet this electronic reporting definition. So yet another reason to use HQM if you're a NextGen client. I mentioned that your performance rate is compared to a benchmark in order to get your score. Well, CMS published these deciles based on a national performance in a baseline period, and that was 2 years prior to the performance period. Essentially, a clinician's performance is compared to the published decile breaks, which is that screenshot you're seeing on your slide. And then points are assigned based on which decile range the performance rate actually falls in. And it really depends on your submission method used. So this means you could have the same percentage for the same measure and receive a different amount of points for it, depending on if you used registry versus the EHR reporting mechanism. And just some quick tips and tricks for the quality category to wrap up is to choose measures with more than 20 in the denominator, make sure it has a benchmark, and make sure it meets the data completeness threshold, or you're only going to see 3 points for that measure. You will need to choose between CQM measures and PQRS measures. This is essentially choosing between the EHR reporting and registry reporting options. And to choose, you're going to have to actually sit down and do a scoring analysis and then a benchmark comparison. So I know it may seem like a lot of work to sit down and spend the time comparing CQM versus PQRS measures, and then selecting the measures and then benchmarking them. But this category has the most weight at 60%, contributing to your composite or overall score, and that determines your payment adjustment. And honestly, it may have even more weight if you have your ACI category reweighted for some reason. So it's definitely important and really worth your time. And lastly, I encourage all of you to run your treatment opportunity reports and check the known issues posted in the success community for any NextGen users. They are constantly releasing HQM patches to resolve these, but you're the only one who will notice if something is off or wrong with your reports. So make sure to stay accountable. Next up is the new category, clinical practice improvement activities. So clinicians select and complete improvement activities from an inventory of high and medium weighted activities. Essentially, they need to attest yes or no to completing up to 4 activities. And there's the opportunity to earn bonus points here for the ACI category or that meaningful use category when any of these activities involve the use of certified EHR technology. Really, the idea here is to reward you for activities you're already doing. CMS has stated numerous times they aren't looking for extensive documentation on these. It really is just an effort to begin recognizing physicians for their efforts to improve their practice. NextGen actually created a white paper specifying which IAs are supported by NextGen and how. They even specified the priority if it was eligible for an ACI bonus, and their recommendation on which types of practices should use it. So it's definitely worth looking at. And the next question I always get is, well, what are some common improvement activities clients are choosing? What should we look at? Where should we start? And here are 5 good examples. The 2 with the blue stars actually count as bonus points for the ACI category, as I mentioned before. That's participating in a health information exchange, so NextGen Share, using the patient portal, Other things that a lot of clients have found useful: if you collect and use patient experience data, or if you do patient surveys, if you offer expanded practice access in the evening or weekend hours, and then the timely communication of test results. These are just some good options and a good place to start. Moving on to the category cost or resource use. This replaces the value-based modifier program, and it's going to start in 2019, most likely. It's still proposed and should be finalized this month. So it is weighted to 0 for this first year. However, CMS did state they're going to provide feedback based on 2017 data, even though it's not going to count towards your MIPS score. So it will be beneficial to see how you performed in this category to ensure success in the future. Also, just to point out, for future years, all the measures are calculated by CMS based on claims data collected for a full year. So there's no actual additional reporting required. And on to our last, our definitely most complicated category, advancing care information. This category was built on the same infrastructure as the Medicare EHR incentive program, also known as meaningful use, because when people don't like something, let's just call it by a new name. This category does greatly reduce the requirements of meaningful use from what we're used to, but you're going to see a lot of the same measures. So first off, there are the required measures. These must be fulfilled for 90 days, and they are part of the base score. These include the security risk analysis, e-prescribing, provide patient access, and health information exchange. So providers will need to have at least 1 in the numerator in the HQM to receive any credit in the ACI category. Now, if you do successfully report on all 4 of these measures, you would actually earn 50% of your category score, so 50 points. And then you would report on the optional measures we'll go over next to actually earn a higher score. So next we have the performance score, which are the measures you have the flexibility to choose to report on for additional points. There are 7 performance measures in the 2017 version, and that includes 2 from the base score. So each measure is worth 10 points. Besides those 2 from the base score, those are actually worth 20 points, and that's that health information exchange measure and provide patient access. So the EC has 90 total points possible for the performance score. And how this would work is, let's say your provider gets a 90% on the secure messaging measure. They would earn 9 points then. Or let's say you even earn 85% on that secure messaging measure. If you're in between any of the percentage thresholds, you just round to the nearest whole number, so you would still receive 9 points. How this category scoring works is you would add your performance on each measure up, which could potentially be as high as 90 points, and then you would add it to your base score. You would add in any bonus points you have from reporting to a public health registry or from those improvement activities, and this would give you a possible 155 points, whereas you only need 100 to cap out the category. So CMS gave providers that extra 55 points of wiggle room because they recognized one of the biggest challenges of the old meaningful use program was that it had that all or nothing component. If you didn't hit a threshold, you automatically failed. That's eliminated with the advancing care information category. So you have a greater degree of flexibility to choose measures in this category that really fit your practice and your patients. And then another caveat to this already complex scoring standard is that the category can be reweighted. So a MIPS eligible clinician's performance score can be reweighted for reasons like insufficient internet connectivity, extreme and uncontrollable circumstances, lack of control over the availability of certified EHR technology. So you may recognize these reasons if you've ever filed a meaningful use hardship exception in the past. These are the same. And basically what happens is these clinicians submit an application to CMS, and if granted, it would reweight this ACI category to 0. And that 25% would then be moved to the quality performance category. So all of these categories are scored and then converted to points based on their weight, and that gives you a provider's composite score. And that composite score is what actually determines your payment adjustment. For this year, a provider's composite score just needs to be over 3 points to avoid a penalty. But if you score over 70 points, you're eligible for a portion of what's called the Exceptional Performance Adjustment. And it's actually funded from a separate incentive pool of $500 million. And it guarantees providers a 0.5% positive payment adjustment. So if we look at the projected MIPS adjustments for 2017, we can see if a provider submits no data, they're going to see an automatic negative 4% payment adjustment. But the higher their score, the greater chance of a positive adjustment they're going to see. So because the losers have to pay the winners, so to speak, CMS is predicting the positive adjustments are going to be relatively small due to the ease of avoiding a penalty with this pick your pace option we have this year. All right, so as we know, the vast majority of clinicians are expected to participate in MIPS the first year. To smooth that transition for select types of MIPS ECs and practices, CMS has provided preferential scoring or exclusions from some or all of the reporting requirements under MIPS. We're going to go through and determine whether your practice's MIPS reporting burden will be impacted by these scoring exceptions, and if they are, how to take advantage of them. First up is small, rural, and underserved practices. So you might be thinking or asking yourself, what's a small practice under MIPS? Well, a small practice is considered a practice of 15 or fewer clinicians. And don't be mistaken, that number does include any non-eligible clinicians. So it really focuses on the number of NPIs associated with that TIN. And then to meet the definition of a rural or underserved practice, they must be located in a rural area, a designated health professional shortage area, or a medically underserved area. Now, CMS has stated numerous times that these types of practices are a crucial part of the healthcare system, and that their goal is to provide options designed to make it easier for small practices to report on their performance and qualify for incentives. CMS is adamant that physicians in small practices who report their performance can do just as well as any mid-sized or larger practice. They've even gone so far to say they expect the number and percentage of small practices participating in the quality payment program to increase and exceed participation in legacy programs, so PQRS, meaningful use, value-based modifier, because of the reduced reporting burden, increased usability of technology, and the stepped-up technical assistance these practices are receiving. CMS also created options built into the MIPS program for 2017 to reduce the participation and reporting burden for small practices. One of these is the ability to pick your pace. So if you're included in MIPS, you're going to be able to pick your pace during the 2017 transition year, where you can range how much you want to submit to reporting fully to only submitting a minimal amount of data. Then the low volume threshold. So if you have less than or equal to $30,000 in Medicare Part B charges, or you see less than 100 Medicare Part B patients, you don't have to participate in MIPS. And then lastly, that minimal participation requirement. This means you really only just need to submit a small amount of data to avoid a negative payment adjustment. These program-wide specifications were put into place with small practices in mind. But let's look at what preferential scoring opportunities are explicitly outlined in the final rule for small practices. Small practices, especially those in rural locations and health professional shortage areas, are required to report only 2 activities in the improvement activities category, instead of the 4 required for larger practices. So if you are a small practice, medium weighted activities are going to be worth 20 points, and high weighted activities are going to be worth 40 points. So essentially, you have fewer requirements in this category, and you just need to complete either 1 high weighted activity or 2 medium weighted activities to cap out this category. Another reporting option available to small practices to ease this reporting burden is applying for the ACI category to be reweighted to 0. And we had mentioned the reasons why earlier. And if you're still unsure of where to start or how to go about reporting to CMS, they've actually launched an initiative to provide free, customized technical assistance to clinicians in small practices. It's a 5-year program funded by MACRA and provides $20 million each year to fund training and education for clinicians in individual or small groups. So through this initiative, clinicians can actually receive direct education and outreach. They would get help choosing and reporting on quality measures, even receive training on new improvement activities, and assistance evaluating their options for joining an advanced APM. Really, they will receive guidance with all aspects of the program, including strategic planning and helping your team adapt to the new quality payment program processes. So CMS has stated that providing these tools to help physicians navigate new programs is key to making sure that they're able to focus on what's more important, and that's the needs of their patients. And then looking ahead to next year, the proposed rule was released for the 2018 QPP program, and I wanted to point out some changes that would affect providers in this special scoring group. In the proposed rule, CMS will award clinicians with the small practice designation 5 bonus points to their final score. They will still be able to report on fewer improvement activities. And instead of having to actually apply for a hardship like this year for the ACI category, they can be automatically considered for one. And lastly, more of your providers may be excluded since the low volume threshold is actually increasing from 30,000 to 90,000 Medicare Part B charges and from 100 to 200 Medicare patients. Again, none of this has been finalized, but I just wanted to highlight what the future looks like for this group of clinicians. All right, so for our second clinician type to receive preferential scoring, I will actually be passing it off to Cindy Kincaid.
Thank you, Lindsay. Okay, well, now we're going to talk about hospital-based, non-patient-facing, and non-physician MIPS ECs. So as we move forward, how are these providers defined under MIPS? Well, a non-physician EC is a clinician who has never had to submit meaningful use data prior to this year, and these include physician assistants, nurse practitioners, clinical nurse specialists, certified registered nurse anesthetists. These are the ones that I think we're going to be the most interested in on this call. However, we are going to cover non-patient-facing ECs, and these include certain types of anesthesiologists, radiologists, and pathologists, just to name a few. They're still expected to participate as long as they meet the criteria. They do have flexibility in what they're required to do, though. An individual clinician is considered non-patient-facing if they have fewer than 100 patient-facing encounters in a given performance period. And clinicians who are practicing in a group are deemed non-patient-facing if in that group more than 75% of those clinicians who are billing under the group tax ID meet the definition. We also want to talk specifically about hospital-based clinicians and those not just at a critical access hospital, but hospitals in general. CMS defines a hospital-based MIPS-eligible physician as a clinician who is one of the 5 eligible clinician types and provides 75% or more of his or her covered professional services in a site of service that is identified by a code as an inpatient hospital, which is a place of service 21, or an on-campus outpatient hospital, which is a place of service 22, or an emergency room, which is a place of service 23. This is based on claims for a period prior to the performance period, so hospital-based clinicians are still participating in MIPS as long as they exceed the volume thresholds we discussed earlier. So let's talk about the determination period for these provider types. CMS will evaluate historical claims data from 2 separate year-long periods for purposes of determining low volume threshold. These are hospital-based and non-patient-facing status for the 2017 performance year. The first determination period will be the period of September 2015 through August to 2016. A second eligibility determination will then be conducted from September 2016 through August 2017 with a 60-day claim runout for those who did not qualify during the first period. The agency intends to distribute a second round of additional notifications as soon as possible during the performance year in question. Special scoring for non-physician, non-patient-facing, and hospital-based ECs are not required to submit ACI data and will automatically have that category reweighted to 0 without requiring an application to be submitted by the MIPS eligible clinician. Whereas MIPS eligible clinicians must submit an application for CMS to reweight the advancing care information performance category to 0. So it's a different type of special scoring for this group of providers. If we look at the category reweighting option, these MIPS eligible clinicians can still choose to report if they would like, and if their data is submitted, CMS will score their performance and weight their advancing care information performance accordingly. For those who decide to forego participation in the ACI category, CMS will reweight the category to 0 and assign the 25% to the quality performance category to maintain the potential for participants to earn up to 100 points in the MIPS final score. Group reporting ACI score. When reporting as a group to the Advancing Care Information Performance category, the group would combine their MIPS eligible clinicians' performance under one taxpayer identification number. However, if you're reporting as a group, non-physician MIPS eligible clinicians will be included in the group calculation for the Advancing Care Information Performance category. So if you have multiple categories, you need to consider these when you're reporting as a group. As we move on to rural health clinics, federally qualified health clinics, critical access hospitals, and ambulatory surgery centers, we want to talk a little bit about the requirements associated with each of these. So now for clinicians who are billing under either the RHC or the FQHC payment methodology, you are not subject to the MIPS payment adjustments. There are different ways that the rural health clinics and federally qualified health centers bill Medicare. However, if you are a clinician who is practicing in a rural health clinic or a federally qualified health center, and for one reason or another, you are billing Medicare Part B, then you are likely required to participate in MIPS. So the point of this slide is really to call that out. While there are some exemptions for those practicing in rural health clinics or FQHCs, it's very important that clinicians double check with their practice manager, especially if you're a clinician who's seeing patients in multiple sites, because you may be billing Part B and not even be aware of it. And I know that we have encountered this several times with some of the FQHCs we work with, where that Medicare was kind of a sideline because of the high focus on Medicaid and community health. However, they are still subject to some of the MIPS requirements and rules. If we move to critical access hospital, or a CAH, that bills under Method 1 or Method 2 and have not assigned your rights to the facility, then you are also eligible to participate in MIPS. The payment adjustment will apply to those Medicare Part B services billed under the PFS only. So critical access hospitals are also reimbursed in a different way as well for services rendered to Medicare beneficiaries. There are several methodologies for how critical access hospitals actually receive reimbursement. There are clinicians who practice in critical access hospitals who bill under what's called Method 1. For those clinicians who are billing in this way, they will be participating in MIPS just like everyone else. But payment adjustments as a result of their performance would only apply to the Medicare Part B charges that are billed by those clinicians. The payment adjustments does not apply to the facility payment, which is the critical access hospitals receive. The MIPS payment adjustment does apply to Method 2 CAH payments when MIPS eligible clinicians who practice in Method 2 CAHs have assigned their billing rights to the CAH. Finally, there's a third scenario where clinicians may be participating through Method 2 billing, but they haven't assigned their billing rights to the critical access hospital. In that case, the MIPS payment adjustment would apply similarly to Method 1 payments. Now, this is pretty confusing, and not a lot of clinicians are familiar with how that works, so we aren't going to focus much on it. We're going to move on to ASCs. I think that's more applicable to the group that we have on our presentation. There was an addition of an exception to the 2017 and 2018 Medicare payment adjustments for ambulatory surgical centers, ASCs, base EPs, that was finalized in the 2017 IPPS and LTC final rule released in August. This means ambulatory surgery centers, ASC-based MIPS-eligible clinicians, will have their ACI category automatically reweighted to 0. And then moving on to another area that we have a few of our clients, I'm thinking we even have a couple of us ending on this webinar today, patient-centered medical home, or people who participate in PCMH. So what is PCMH under MIPS? Well, it's one of the following. It's an entity that is accredited by Nationally Recognized Accreditation Association, NCQA Joint Commission, or URAC. It's an entity that participates in Medicaid medical home model, or an APM that is designated as a medical home model. If you are receiving NQA patient-centered specialty recognition, and you are accredited by another certifying body that has certified at least 500 medical organizations and meets the national accreditation guidelines. For those clinicians who are participating in certified patient-centered medical homes or comparable specialty practices, they will automatically earn full credit in this special scoring category. There is nothing additional that they need to do. Only one practice with a 10 has to be recognized as a patient-centered medical home or comparable specialty practice for the 10 to get full credit in this category. So now as we look ahead to 2018, CMS will continue to give certified patient-centered medical homes or comparable specialty medical homes the maximum improvement activity score. CMS proposes to expand the definition of certified patient-centered medical homes to include CPC plus APM models. CMS also proposes to make it clear that the term recognized is the same as term certified as a patient-centered medical home or a comparable specialty practice. And CMS also proposes a threshold of 50% for 2018 for the number of practices where a 10 needs to be recognized as a patient-centered medical home for the 10 to get full credit of the improvement activities performance category. So I'm going to turn this back over to Lindsay now as we move into the Medicare Shared Savings Program.
Great, thank you, Cindy. So to round out our section here on special scoring, we're going to end with the Medicare Shared Savings Program. So you might be wondering, why would I bring up the Medicare Shared Savings Program when we're talking about MIPS today? The MSSP is an APM, and you're half right. The Medicare Shared Savings Program's tracks 2 and 3 are indeed APMs. But track 1 of the MSP is considered what's called a MIPS APM. Certain APMs actually include MIPS eligible clinicians, and those are called MIPS APMs, and they receive a special MIPS scoring under what's called the APM scoring standard. And a side note here, most advanced APMs are also MIPS APMs. So if a clinician in an APM doesn't meet the threshold requirements of having sufficient payments or patients through that APM, that clinician is actually going to be scored under MIPS according to this APM scoring standard. So this means if you're on the call and are a part of an APM, this APM scoring standard under MIPS could potentially apply to you if you don't meet these thresholds. The special reporting requirements include full credit in the improvement activities category, so similar to that PCMH designation we talked about a few slides ago. And then there's no need to report any additional quality measures outside of what you already do as your APM entity. So essentially, these participants only need to worry about the ACI category and those meaningful use measures. All right, so to wrap up the presentation today, I wanted to address a few frequently asked questions I've been getting a lot lately, again, not only from our clients, but also from our consulting team who is out in the field, who is with clients every single day, and what they're really looking forward to. The first one is, I'm part of a small practice located in a rural area. I understand the preferential scoring for the CPIA category, but since I meet 2 of the designated special statuses, does this mean I don't have to report any activities to get full credit? So as we all know now, groups with 15 or fewer participants, or if you're in a rural health professional shortage area, you only have to report half of the normally required improvement activities. However, just because you fall into 2 of those special categories, there's no way to double dip, as we were calling it. So you will still have to report on 1 to 2 activities depending on their weight versus stacking up your exclusions and not reporting anything. Next up, I am exempt from MIPS because I am under the low volume threshold, but my practice has decided to report as a group. Does this affect me? This is a big one that I get asked almost every week. And the answer is yes. If your practice opts in to report from MIPS as a group, CMS will assess the low volume threshold at the TIN level. So all clinicians within your group have the same status, aka all clinicians are either excluded or not excluded. Therefore, clinicians who fall below that threshold as an individual may find themselves required to report for and receive payment adjustment under MIPS because the group collectively exceeds that threshold. So be careful and make sure you watch out for that. What if I'm reporting as a group under MIPS and 2 out of my 12 providers report to IRIS or any other registry? Can we count this as bonus points? And the answer is yes. If you're reporting as a group and you have 2 or more clinicians, the credit for submission to the registry will apply to the entire group. CMS does not set a minimum threshold for how many clinicians within a group need to be actively engaged with the registry in order for the group to attest yes to completing this measure. So this is an often thing here. Under the ACI category, if you have 1 clinician who reported meaningful use in the past, they used to have to report to 2 public health registries. So they can actually use that as bonus points now, and that can apply to the whole practice just because 1 clinician is doing it. And finally, the most asked question I've gotten from clinicians over the past month. For meaningful use last year, I claimed an exclusion for the health information exchange measure and the e-prescribing measure. Should I plan on doing the same this year? And in the final rule, CMS notes that fewer required measures and the elimination of thresholds have enabled the removal of many of the exclusions that existed under the EHR incentive programs. Specifically pertaining to the e-prescribing objective, CMS actually stated EPs who write less than 100 permissible prescriptions during their reporting period are allowed an exclusion for e-prescribing under the EHR incentive program, which we did not propose for MIPS. So the answer is no. There are no more exclusions under meaningful use measures for this year. Even if you have a 0 in your denominator for either the HIE measure, so sending a CCDA using NextGen Share, or the e-prescribing measure, you will not see any credit in that category because both of these measures are part of the base score. Personally, it almost seems like CMS forgot to add these exclusions because they're actually being proposed to be reinstated in the 2018 QPP proposed rule. But for this year, you will absolutely need to report at least a 1 in the numerator for both of these. So if you're uncertain with where your practice stands, not only with the impact of this new quality payment program, but with anything related to the health of your practice, let I-10 help. We can assess your current readiness, we can provide recommendations, and help you implement new processes and procedures. Another way we can help is through our macro support packages. The time really is now to start preparing for MIPS reporting in order to get the highest reimbursement possible. And we can help you by tailoring the support you need through our macro fundamentals, intermediate, and expert packages. We're already in that final 90-day period here at the end of the year. This is the last reporting period clinicians have to participate in MIPS, so reach out to us if you need any support. And if you are wondering what your next step should be, go ahead and visit us at i10f.com. Continue to sign up for our webinars, follow our blog, and consider our 3-day fixed price on-site consultations for clinical workflow, revenue cycle in front office, and technology and performance. All right, so it's time for questions. Thank you all for joining the call today. I hope it was helpful and informative, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Chelsea.
Hey, Lindsay, Cindy, thank you so much for all that information. I know that was a ton. We have a couple of questions. Please feel free to enter your questions in the questions area of the webinar control panel. And we're just going to take them in the order that we received them. So this one we received way in the beginning of the presentation, Lindsay, so I'm sure that she's going to be eager for an answer on this. If we are a PCHM, which allows to receive full credit for the clinical improvement activities, do we qualify automatically for the 10% bonus under the ACI category?
I can grab that one. That's a great question, and it's something to consider. No, so if you're a PCMH, yes, you are going to get the full credit in that category, but you will not get any bonus points in that ACI category. So if you do want to submit improvement activities, even though you're a PCMH and getting full credit, you can choose to do so in order to get those bonus points. But nope, you're not going to be automatically awarded those, unfortunately.
Thanks, Lindsay. Next question. Can we receive slides for this presentation? I can take that one. Yes, I'll be sending out a follow-up email within the next week that has a link both to the recording of this if you want to watch it again or share it with someone, along with a download of the slides that you just click on the link and you can download the slides off our website. So, we'll be sending that out within a week here. Next question. I used the QPP Lookup Tool, and only 3 of my providers are expected to participate in MIPS out of the 27 we have at our practice. However, we did not have the small practice special status bolded. Is that a mistake, or should I call CMS to correct it?
I can grab that one. Unfortunately, this is not a mistake. CMS defines a small practice as 15 or fewer clinicians. So while this means you only have 3 clinicians actually eligible to participate in MIPS, you still have over, I think Chelsea said 27 NPIs associated with your practice. So a lot of people are confused by this, but just remember, CMS is making that small practice determination based on the number of NPIs associated with your TIN, not the number of eligible clinicians to participate under MIPS.
Great, thank you, Lindsay. And it looks like this may be our last question, so if you have any that you were sitting on, feel free to ask them. I have a question regarding the improvement activities. I noticed in the FAQ section that you said you only have to have 2 providers report to a registry for all of my providers to get credit if I report as a group. Does this follow the same concept for the improvement activities?
Gotcha. I can grab that one. So yes, you're absolutely right, and that's a great question. So for the improvement activities, if at least one clinician within your TIN can attest yes to completing that activity, the entire group can report on that activity and get credit. So you're right, it follows that trend of that same registry option we covered in the FAQ. If you have one provider in your practice that can report yes or attest yes to an improvement activity, the whole practice gets credit. However, I do want to point out that CMS is taking comment on that in the proposed rule for next year. So this may be the last year that you can do that and take advantage of that. But we will see once that proposed rule is finalized.
Thanks, Lindsay. Looks like we have another question. If our NPs are exempt due to performance under the threshold, do we have to include them in the group, or can they be individual, separate, or file for an exemption?
So let me look this question here so let me understand, Chelsea. They're asking if they are under the low volume threshold and they're reporting as a group, will they be included? And that would be yes. So even if you have individual providers who are under that low volume threshold, if you choose to report as a group, they will be included in your group level data. The only way to have them excluded is either A, you report individually, or B, as a group, your entire group is under that low volume threshold. But the numbers don't change. It's still $30,000 in Medicare Part B charges and 100 patients, no matter if you're looking at an individual level or the group level.
So could they file for an exemption for that?
No, they cannot. If you're reporting as a group, then you are required to participate if you're over that threshold.
Okay, thanks for that clarification, Lindsay. If you think of any questions after the fact, or if you're not sure that you want to ask them in the middle of the webinar, feel free. You see Lindsay's information up on the screen. She truly is a subject matter expert in this. Feel free to reach out to her. We're happy to help. I'll be sending out a recording within the next week. You can feel free to reply to that if you have questions. Basically, any way you can get a hold of us, we're happy to answer them. So we look forward to hearing from you, and thanks for joining us today. And I hope you have the great rest of the week and weekend, and happy fall.